What if your entire life turned out to be built on a lie? Could you bear the truth if the person you loved harbored a secret so dark it could shatter everything? In today's true crime case, we uncover the horrifying tale of a husband who stumbles upon a devastating truth about his wife, leading to one of the most brutal murders Austin, Texas has ever witnessed. This isn't just a story of hidden pasts or broken trust. It's a descent into terror that even left hardened detectives stunned. On the surface, Matthew Thompson and Kayla Lewis seemed like the ideal couple, a romance others envied and admired. Their love story began in Austin, Texas, where they were both raised in close-knit communities. They met at a local church event and instantly connected. Matthew, a 32-year-old construction worker with deep ties to his family and community, was known for his sense of duty and his role as a protector. A tall, rugged man with strong values, he was the type of person who looked after others before thinking of himself. For Matthew, marriage was sacred, a commitment to be honored at all costs. Kayla, meanwhile, was a radiant and captivating presence. At 28, she was a successful hairstylist, building her reputation in Austin's beauty scene. With a glowing complexion, captivating dark eyes, and a charismatic smile, Kayla drew people to her effortlessly. She possessed a warmth that made everyone feel valued, and her confidence and charm were unmistakable. But behind their picture-perfect image, something dark was brewing. A secret that, when exposed, would tear apart lives and lead to unimaginable violence. It didn't take long for Matthew to be drawn to Kayla like a magnet. Their relationship was intense, moving quickly as they became inseparable. Within months of meeting, Matthew brought her to every family gathering, introducing her as the one. She fit seamlessly into his life, charming his mother, siblings, and closest friends. Matthew himself fell deeply in love, so much so that within a year he proposed. Kayla, with tears of joy, accepted without hesitation. To everyone around them, it seemed like a perfect love story. But beneath the surface, subtle signs of tension began to emerge. Signs that Matthew, blinded by love, couldn't yet see. Their wedding day was everything they dreamed of, held in a beautiful church and attended by hundreds. As Matthew watched Kayla walk down the aisle, she looked radiant. But even in those precious moments, he noticed her hands tremble and her gaze occasionally drift as if lost in deep thought. He brushed it off as wedding day nerves, eager to begin their new life together. The honeymoon was an extravagant escape to the Caribbean, but even amid the luxury, something felt off. Kayla would sometimes become distant, her eyes clouded with an emotion she wouldn't share. When Matthew asked if anything was wrong, she'd wave it off, chalking it up to stress or homesickness, giving him a reassuring smile. But as the weeks after their return turned into months, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that there was something his new wife wasn't telling him. Settling into their cozy home on the outskirts of Austin, Matthew threw himself into creating the life he had always wanted. Fixing up their house, enjoying weekend barbecues, and working hard. Kayla, meanwhile, focused on her beauty business, often staying out late with clients, but Matthew started noticing strange changes in her behavior. She became secretive with her phone, would disappear for hours without explanation, and sometimes even left the salon empty when she claimed to be working late. Matthew's unease grew, but he didn't want to confront it, telling himself he was overthinking. Yet the tension only increased. Kayla became withdrawn, avoiding eye contact, and at times, she seemed as though she wanted to say something but couldn't. Their intimacy waned, and Matthew felt a deepening loneliness in a marriage that had once brought him so much happiness. One night, unable to ignore his suspicions any longer, Matthew did something he never thought he'd do. He searched through her things. In a hidden corner of the closet, he found a small box. Inside were documents that made his heart race. Among them was a birth certificate with a name he didn't recognize, Elijah Davis. His confusion only deepened as he found medical records detailing Kayla's transition from male to female. Matthew's world shattered in an instant. He felt a wave of emotions: anger, shock, confusion, and heartbreak. The woman he had loved, the woman he had vowed to protect and cherish, had kept this from him. To Matthew, this wasn't just a secret. It was a breach of trust that shook the foundation of their relationship. The person Matthew thought he knew now felt like a stranger. This revelation was just the first domino in a chain of events that would spiral into an unimaginable nightmare. What Matthew didn't realize in that instant was that his feelings of betrayal and anger would soon lead to something darker, something violent. Matthew sat in silence, staring blankly at the documents strewn across the bed. A storm of emotions swirled within him. Hurt, confusion, anger. How long had Kayla hidden this from him? How could she deceive him about something so central to who she was? As the hours passed in their empty home, the quiet ticking of the clock amplified his growing fury. When Kayla finally came home that evening, she was met with the sight of Matthew waiting on the edge of their bed, his expression cold, the damning papers laid out for her to see. As her eyes landed on the documents, she paled, frozen in the doorway as if preparing to flee. "You lied to me." Matthew's voice was low and trembling, his fury barely contained as he slowly stood, holding the documents up as evidence. "Who are you?" "No, what are you?" Kayla's heart sank. She had always feared this moment, but hoped she would be able to share her truth with him on her own terms. She had wanted to tell Matthew in her own time, but the fear of losing him kept her silent for too long. "Matthew, please," she said, her voice pleading. "I was going to tell you. I swear I just didn't know how. I love you. This doesn't change who I am or who we are." She took a cautious step toward him, her eyes brimming with tears. But her words only seemed to stoke Matthew's anger. "It doesn't change who you are," he shouted, his voice rising. "You've been lying to me this whole time, tricking me into marriage. Do you even understand what you've done?" Matthew's mind was a whirl of hurt and disbelief, struggling to grasp how the life he'd built with Kayla could be based on something he now saw as betrayal. "I gave you everything." Matthew's voice broke with the intensity of his hurt. "My love, my loyalty, my life. And all this time, you've been lying to me about the most basic thing. Who you really are." Kayla's face was streaked with tears, but she held her ground, desperate to make him understand. "I didn't tell you because I was afraid of losing you, Matthew. You mean everything to me. I thought if you knew, you wouldn't love me anymore." "You thought right," Matthew spat, his voice sharp and laced with venom. His anger spiraled, the betrayal crashing over him in waves. The room felt suffocating, his once beloved wife now a stranger. The argument escalated with every word. Matthew's anger crackled like a live wire, sparking unpredictably as he paced the room. Meanwhile, Kayla, torn between explaining and protecting herself, saw a side of him she'd never seen before, one filled with a visceral fury that chilled her to the core. As Matthew shouted, his voice echoing through the room, Kayla's heart raced. She could feel the intensity of his rage building, unpredictable and terrifying. "Please, just calm down, Matthew. We can talk this through," Kayla pleaded, her voice trembling as she raised her hands in a desperate attempt to placate him. "I'll answer any questions, just don't do anything you'll regret." But Matthew wasn't listening. His world had shattered. He couldn't think clearly, couldn't see anything but betrayal and anger. "Calm down," he shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "You lied to me for years, and you want me to calm down?" In a blind fit of fury, Matthew stormed into the garage, his eyes scanning wildly until they fell upon a hammer. Gripping it tightly, he walked back into the house with a grim, terrifying resolve. Kayla, frozen in fear in the bedroom, watched him approach, her eyes wide with terror. Without warning, he swung the hammer down. Kayla screamed, raising her arms to protect herself. But Matthew was relentless, his rage driving each strike. Her pleas for mercy faded as he continued his assault, the fury so intense that soon the walls and floor were stained with blood. The brutality shocked even the most hardened detectives, who later described the scene as one of the most disturbing they had ever witnessed. But Matthew didn't stop there. In a fit of twisted obsession, he dragged Kayla's lifeless body to the bathroom, where his rage took a darker turn. With a knife from the kitchen, he slashed and mutilated, leaving her nearly unrecognizable. When authorities arrived, the apartment was soaked in blood. In the center of the room, Matthew sat, his expression blank and haunted, as though he couldn't grasp the horrific scene around him. In a daze, Matthew fumbled with his phone, his blood-stained hands shaking as he dialed 911. As the call connected, his voice was barely a whisper. I killed her," he said, hollow, devoid of any feeling beyond shock. The operator's calm voice urged him to stay on the line, asking for details. But Matthew could barely process what he had just done, his mind reeling in fragments. All he knew was that his life was over. When officers arrived, they found Matthew on the floor, staring blankly at Kayla's lifeless, mutilated body beside him. Tears stained his face, his hands covered in the vivid evidence of his actions. The man once known as a proud, hard-working husband was now reduced to a hollow shell, lost under the weight of what he had done. News of Kayla's tragic death sent ripples through the tight-knit Austin community. As the grisly details came to light, the story ignited fierce debate. To some, Matthew was a man betrayed, pushed to the edge. To others, his actions were unforgivable, monstrous. But in the end, nothing could undo the horror or bring Kayla back. What had started as a secret kept in fear had ended in brutal tragedy. When the police escorted Matthew from the blood-stained floors of their once happy home, the full gravity of the tragedy was chillingly clear. Neighbors gathered, murmuring in shock, the humid Austin air thick with disbelief. Blue and red lights flashed over the darkened street, illuminating a scene of irrevocable heartbreak. Inside the house, detectives surveyed a crime scene that tested even their seasoned composure. Kayla's body lay unrecognizable in the bathroom, her life erased in a fury. The walls, once bright, were now marred with the dark stains of violence. What had once been a home filled with love was now a place forever haunted by betrayal and death. At the police station, as the numbness wore off, the reality of what Matthew had done began to settle in, marking the end of a love story turned to nightmare. However, prosecutors painted Matthew as a calculated, cold-blooded killer who had unleashed brutal rage on his unsuspecting wife. The trial laid bare Kayla's private life, with her character scrutinized heavily in the media. Yet the focus in court was on Matthew, whose actions would be dissected by jurors and the public alike. Witnesses, including friends and neighbors, described Matthew and Kayla as a seemingly happy couple, though some noted that Matthew could be controlling at times. The gruesome crime scene details were revealed in chilling detail. The blood-splattered walls, the hammer used in the attack, and the shocking state of Kayla's body. The courtroom sat in horrified silence as the images flashed across the screen. One of the most heart-wrenching moments of the trial came when Kayla's mother took the stand. Her face etched with grief, she recounted her daughter's love for Matthew and her worry about telling him her past, hoping he would one day accept her completely. Her words lingered in the air, adding a tragic layer to the story. "She just wanted to be loved," she said, her voice breaking. "And instead, she was taken from us." After weeks of testimony, emotional statements, and closing arguments, the jury returned its verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Matthew remained expressionless as the sentence was read, his face a mask of resignation. He had transformed from a hopeful newlywed to a convicted murderer, his life and dreams shattered beyond repair. As he was led from the courtroom, Matthew looked briefly toward the gallery where Kayla's family sat, their eyes filled with anguish. It was painfully clear that no verdict could ever bring her back or heal the wounds his actions had left behind. Following the trial, the case continued to spark intense debate. It went viral on social media and YouTube, with clips of the trial and documentaries racking up millions of views. Kayla's friends and supporters mourned the loss of a woman who had simply wanted to live her truth, a dream that had ended in tragedy. The case ignited a viral movement, which called for greater protections and rights for transgender individuals, drawing widespread attention to the high rates of violence faced by the trans community, especially among Black trans women. As the hashtag gained traction, it sparked crucial conversations around acceptance, safety, and the impacts of societal prejudice. The house where Kayla had lost her life was eventually sold, but neighbors say its tragic history cast a long shadow over the community, leaving a scar that would take years to heal. Matthew's family, too, struggled to come to terms with his actions, with some relatives saying they felt they had never truly known the man behind such violence. This story goes beyond the horror of a single crime. It highlights how deeply buried secrets, left unspoken, can erupt in ways no one expects. Kayla's life was cut short not due to a lack of courage, but because the world around her was still grappling with acceptance. Matthew's uncontrolled anger serves as a chilling reminder of the tragic consequences that can arise when issues of identity, trust, and masculinity collide in destructive ways. As the case continued to dominate social media, it served as a grim warning of how unaddressed fears and societal pressures can lead to devastation, tearing lives and communities apart in unimaginable ways.